So I think this promises to be a pretty interesting Champions League evening. Spurs, as discussed there in the news round, 1-0 down to Milan. They're at home tonight. Meanwhile, the glamour tie in Munich this evening. Top of Ligue 1 versus top of the Bundesliga. So since Bayern were 1-0 winners in Paris, they are 2 wins from 3. They lost to Mönchengladbach the weekend after beating PSG, but they've 2 wins since. As for PSG, as is often the way, they are dancing a merry dance in the domestic league, scoring 4, 3 and 4 goals respectively. 3 wins for 3. This should be a very interesting game for a whole host of reasons. Happy to say Philippe Auclair is with us. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Might start with Kylian Mbappe. When don't I start with Kylian Mbappe? I suppose.
Why not?
He's often pretty
We'll
interesting.
probably end with Kylian Mbappe as well.
Yes, indeed. Guilty. So invariably, as is the way with Kylian Mbappe, in the build-up to this huge game, he was asked if an exit this evening could dictate your future and prompt your departure from PSG. And, well, it's a hell of a response. He said, "If I linked my future to the Champions League, without wishing to show disrespect to the club, I would have left a long time ago." To which everyone at PSG said, "Thanks for nothing, Kylian. Thank you."
He's wonderful, isn't he? I mean, I don't think I can think of any player who knows how to play the media game better than he does. He gives absolutely nothing away. He's never ever done that, and he plays everything so beautifully. He's played Real Madrid and he's won. He's played PSG and he's won. He's played the French Federation and he's won. I won't read anything into what Kylian says. Sometimes you just have to take it for what it is. It's basically, if he said it, he means it. And I don't think you can see in that like a call or like a little wave he's doing to other clubs. Well, you know what? I would like to win that Champions League, so maybe I could win it with you. I wouldn't see it like that. There is a certain facetiousness about him, which is a very important element of his character and actually one of the most engaging elements of his character. I don't know if you saw that. Did the rounds on some Twitter accounts after the game against Marseille. There's one, and it's, you're talking about one of the games which means the most in French football, where honestly the tackles are hard and so forth. And he was shown playing tricks and doing jokes with Marseille players and really taking the mickey out of them. But in such a way that even they didn't know how to react. It's just fun. And I think that's the way you should. I mean, he meant exactly what he said, but we shouldn't read anything more than what he actually said on the night. Yeah. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's another Mbappe quote which will lead us into the wider PSG chat ahead of the game this evening. And he said this a couple of weeks ago after the 1-0 defeat to Bayern in Paris. And he was asked about the return leg. I'm sure you can. And he said, in effect, he said, our players will have to be in good health for the return leg. Everyone needs to eat and sleep well. At which point, everybody thought the same thing, that he's talking about Neymar. And subsequent to that, Mbappe has said, it wasn't a dig at Neymar. In the situation, a dig is the last thing we need. It was a piece of advice for everyone. Now, when everybody assumes it's Neymar, I'm inclined to think he meant it towards Neymar. What was your read on all our players need to eat and sleep well?
Oh, Neymar. I immediately thought of Neymar and for another simple reason is that there were reports in the French media at the time that Neymar was getting in trouble with his neighbors in his quite well-to-do suburb of Paris called Bougival, which is really, really nice, actually. And because the neighbors were constantly complaining about the noise at his house, and there were parties to, 2, 3 in the morning. And of course, every time they kept calling the police, and the police would come and say, well, could you be a bit quieter? And of course, as the mayor of Bougival said, we can give him as many 150 euros fines as we want. It's not going to make any difference, is it? He's got to do something about it. So the fact that Kylian Mbappe said what he said immediately after these reports appeared in the French media makes me think that on this occasion, perhaps, what he said afterwards was to be taken with a pinch of salt. Maybe he was thinking of everybody, but he was certainly including Neymar in this. And we're laughing about it, even though Neymar's situation is nothing to be laughed about as far as the player is concerned, because you've read reports he's now out for the season. He's just had surgery in Doha, actually, of all places, to try and fix that worrisome ankle that has been a problem for him for quite a long time now. And he's going to miss, obviously, the game against Bayern, but he's going to miss every single other game of PSG season, which in some ways, I'm sure we're going to come to that, might not be as bad news as people might have thought,
Yeah. He does, to stall on his ankle for a moment, he's always reminded me a touch of Jack Wilshere. It's that late chop away and ankle often prone.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think if you talk to sports doctors, specialists, they will tell you that the ankle is the most delicate and fragile part of the body of a footballer. A knee, actually, it's sometimes easier to come back from a cruciate ligament or median ligament injury in the knee than it is from those problems at the ankles, because they're recurrent, which is what happened to Jack Wilshere. Every time you thought, oh, he's back, he's back and his ankle has healed. Well, no, 3-4 weeks later, there would be another problem. And we know what the result has been. He's had nothing like the career he should have had. And in the case of Neymar, though certainly Neymar has won big things and, has become a superstar and so forth. And, the question will remain, what if he'd actually been fit more often than has been the case? And what if this ankle hadn't been bothering him, certainly for the last few years? And, well, the answer, we'll never know, because to be honest, the recuperation for this type of injuries also depends. The lifestyle does play a big part in that.
Neymar pre-World Cup, Philippe, was having, certainly on paper, I can't claim to watch him week in, week out in French football.
Yeah,
but on paper,
he was superb.
He was really having a good season. He had scored 18 goals, so he was on course for a career best at PSG.
Yeah.
To what extent did the World Cup happen? Did he have that sliding doors moment against Croatia where he went from delivering after so many disappointments to it being, the rug pulled from under him? To what degree did he arrive back into PSG and say, well, to hell with all this, let's party and drown my sorrows?
Yes, and well, I'm not sure that was necessarily the way he reacted, but I would agree with you that it had a greater impact. The World Cup had a greater impact on him than it had almost on any other player I can think of. And I would say that it actually transferred to PSG as a whole, because obviously Kylian Mbappe as well, there was an impact, a psychological impact. And of course, you find yourself, imagine that, you've got the world champion, Leo Messi, who is there. Kylian Mbappe, who's been mocked and ridiculed in ridiculous fashion by Emi Martinez and so forth, but, who lost that final. And then you've got Neymar, one who completely missed out on this World Cup, not for the first time. So you can imagine the tensions are going to be there. And which explains for me completely normally, on top of the physical exertions, obviously, it explains why PSG went through a very, very difficult phase. And why suddenly the Neymar we had seen at the beginning of the season, you're quite right, he played some of his very, very best football during that period. He had one of those windows, which he's had actually more regularly than people think, because it's very easy to dismiss Neymar saying, oh, he's a party animal. He never delivers. He's a kind of Ronaldinho Mark II when he was at PSG. And that was that. Sometimes he switches it on. It's wonderful. Most of the time, it's actually switched off. That's not true. There were many moments in previous years where Neymar was actually the best thing about PSG. There were many moments where you thought actually he's one of the few who seemed to care. But in this season, the World Cup, there's, as you say, the Neymar before the World Cup, the Neymar after the World Cup, and then obviously the injuries. So yeah, he's not quite the same player. And will he ever be the same player again? We don't know. He's not getting any younger.
Generally speaking, and I know we're on the outside, but generally speaking, what's the understanding of the relationship between Mbappe and Neymar?
In fairness, I don't think it's as bad as people think it has been. Because of the personality of the players involved, I don't think that either of them is the kind of, Machiavellian, manipulatory character, or people who built in anger and people who build frustration and jealousy. I don't think that's the case. So it's very volatile. It has been very volatile, especially since Leo Messi has arrived. But I would say that in general, their relationship has been pretty good, pretty good, which is strange because you could say it's a weird triangle. Like Messi and Neymar were very close when they were at Barcelona, and Messi and Mbappe, obviously, when you see them playing together at the moment, it's just wonderful to see. I mean, there's an understanding there, and Mbappe and Neymar, when the two together, I don't think there's much of a problem. But when you put the three, there's something weird which happens, which seems to it's kind of point is it's almost as if the fuses blow up in this particular electrical circuit. As long as they're a duo, I mean, three is a crowd basically, and but as far as their relationship is concerned, and for what we can say, because we can only rely on what we see in the media, what we read in their body language, what we sometimes hear from people who are close to their entourage. But you never know how much of that is actually close to the truth. I don't think the problem is as serious as has been made. There have been frictions. There have been moments when things haven't been right between them. But by and large, the relationship is not as bad as the relationship I can think between in other teams. Like think about the relationship between the players at Bayern when it was FC Hollywood. We're nowhere near that.
Okay.
Nowhere near that.
Okay.
Yeah.
For people who didn't see the first leg in Paris, Mbappe came off the bench as he recovered from injury and electrified what was a very flat PSG performance. I mean, there were times, Philippe, where PSG were a parody of themselves when it comes to the imbalance in that squad.
Yeah. And the thing is that the imbalance is going to be less of a problem now. Because, and we saw it against Marseille, for example, in what was a big game, was a really big game. And suddenly we see when they play with only two players up front, and what players, and you realize that there's actually a much more balanced midfield where people are covering for each other, where you can have Vitinha and Verratti, two super players. And you've got Hakimi and Nuno Mendes, and as wing backs, it's beautiful. And you've got Sergio Ramos, who, to be honest, he amazes me. I think he amazes everybody because he's playing absolutely at the top. He's at the top of his game at the moment. Marquinhos, who's also a very good player. They've lost Kimpembe on the injury, but some people, I would say, would think it's a kind of a blessing in disguise without, casting any aspersions on Kimpembe's character or talent. But they look better without him. And they have looked better and more balanced. The imbalance was there, was always a problem. This is the thing. There are moments they're totally irresistible. They're able to put together moves, which I don't think. I can't think of any other teams which can do that because of the speed at which it happens, precisely because of Mbappe, because of the imagination and still the incredible acceleration Messi has got of a few yards, and the vision of Verratti, and also Vitinha. I keep coming back to him. Is actually a very important player. Now that Neymar is out, Christophe Galtier has been able to go back to what was his original formation at the beginning of the season, and which was terrific, which is a 3-4-3. Now, obviously, one of the three has gone, so it's more of a 3-5-2. So the midfield is better balanced. It's not quite as porous as has been the case before. Because if you think about the games against Bayern, but at times you were thinking, it's just like knife through butter. It's so easy. And they always will have these periods of, we say flottement in French, where, when they're not quite too sure of themselves. And then they will have also these moments of incredible energy and imagination. And with the team as it is now, they will have just as much imagination, but they will have more balance and more solidity, which is why, and I don't think that's really going too far and say that saying the game is still almost a 50-50 against Bayern. They're totally capable of doing something there.
So, the problem with PSG is very identifiable. Would the Parisian media, would the PSG fans be almost openly saying, well, losing one of the three, it's Neymar in this instance, is a blessing in disguise. We're a better team with just two of them. Is that like the talk at large, or are they just so in love with the idea of the three? No, okay.
No. I think this has changed. At the beginning, yes, it was a bit like somebody buying, a wrapper with pictures of great players and suddenly having the three they'd always wanted together. And this has changed, and um, the the idea is very much that of the three, the one who is the most dispensable is Neymar, which is a bit unfair considering his contribution to the club over the past few years. But given that Messi is playing at a very high level again, and obviously Kylian Mbappe is PSG, he's the PSG project is a Mbappe project. I mean, I would say the PSG project is that how can we keep him in Paris for as long as we possibly can? And so, yes, I think the PSG fans have gone past that. The media as well, sometimes to excess, which is why I think we shouldn't be too hard on Neymar. We shouldn't exaggerate either. Realize that the fact that the problem is there is an imbalance is not due just to him. The problem that there is an imbalance is due to the fact of the three.
Yeah.
And does Kylian Mbappe track back? Well, not really. Does Lionel Messi track back? Well, not really. So you're basically playing 8v11 when you're out of possession, which is a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And I presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the question. I presume Christophe Galtier is under severe pressure from the hierarchy to play all three, regardless of what his footballing instincts might tell him.
Well, yes. Yes, there is that. And in a way, the problem has been taken out of his own hands, so for which he's relieved. I mean, the fact that he said himself yesterday in his press conference, when he was asked about Neymar and his absence, he actually said himself, the team is better balanced without him. I mean, that's quite extraordinary.
Okay, he
said it, the verbatim.
Yeah.
And then he corrected himself immediately by saying, but we don't score as many goals when he's around. But knowing where Christophe Galtier comes from, the kind of manager that he is, when you look at what he's done at Nice, at Lille, at Saint-Etienne, he's not a gung-ho manager. He's a very good leader of men, so to speak. He's very smart. He knows how to organize a defense and midfield and so forth. He's very methodical. He's got charisma as well, but he's not the kind of, like a De Zerbi or a Zeman or a Bielsa who would be happy to throw everything and go for it. Even though I'm not sure Bielsa would have liked Neymar in his team. I don't think he would have appreciated his defensive contributions. But Galtier is very much, he can look a bit dour, I mean, from the outside. And the pressure was on him. And in a way, like the pressure has been on every single PSG manager before him. Because don't forget, it's not just like you have Mbappe, Messi, and Neymar, but you also had, for example, Angel Di Maria, who was at times the best PSG player. And his place in the team was never quite assured because there had to be a slot reserved for the superstars, which he's not, even though he was sometimes the best player in the team. Mm. And in a way now, Galtier is in a situation where he's not placed in front of that problem, of that dilemma. So I think it must be a relief for him.
Yes.
And I was reading, before talking to you, I was reading the French press from the day, and everybody says, and it's quite extraordinary, he said, that's the best news in PSG season. Incredible, isn't it? You're talking about a player who cost 222 million here, who has been, by the way, your best or second best player for a number of seasons now. Mm. Still, that's what you say.
I have visions of Galtier to start next season asking his sports science department to manufacture hamstring injuries for various players.
Dear.
Just a big picture question. This is a very intriguing Champions League situation. In the main, most people have a leaning towards Man City as favourites, followed by Bayern. Mm-hmm. There is great respect for Napoli. Real Madrid. And then I suppose there's the rest in whatever particular order you want to put them into. You would have saw Bayern beat PSG in the first leg and have a sense of them generally. Who do you see as favourites for the Champions League this year and why?
Wow. If I'm listening purely to my head, I would say Manchester City for obvious reasons. They've got the deepest squad. They have genuine will to. Well, everybody wants to win the Champions League, but in their case, it's I think you can put up a notch, ramp the amp to 11 in their case. They seem the better equipped, the best equipped actually. Though you will say that their previous record, goes against them. Bayern, I'm not entirely convinced, I have to say. There are moments where I find them absolutely magnificent, others when I'm a little bit surprised by how open they can be. I don't think there are. I mean, the situation, by the way, in Bundesliga shows that they're certainly not singing and dancing their way to another title. Borussia Dortmund, same number of points, a number of teams just behind them. And when it comes to the others, my goodness, it's very hard to tell. Real Madrid is Real Madrid. Yes, okay, fine, I'll accept that. But there are some dark horses, and I have to say what happened last night has made me think again about that, because I still don't know what to think of this Chelsea team in Europe. And they've got us used to having poor seasons domestically and getting it together in Europe. They've done that a number of times, where they were also really struggling in the league. And what they started to show last night was actually quite impressive against a very
good performance.
It was an excellent performance with excellent individual performances, but also real shape, to that team. Some big contributions from big players who perhaps had not been at the right level for a while. Signs basically that things are starting to get together. Because to be honest, I don't think they've been as bad as people have said. I think they've just been unlucky, or they've been lacking cutting edge and the rest of it. The other team which really impressed me, but that's almost in aesthetic terms, I thought Benfica were just at times just sublime against and not the best of opponents. But I just marvel at the way that this club is capable of reinventing itself every single season, losing, big players and finding more. And yesterday they were just magnificent. And so don't discard them at all. So I do think it's actually rather open. It's not one of those seasons where you think there are 3 or 4 teams which look to be really on top of everything else. I don't think so. Each of them has shown signs of weakness. It is not the Real Madrid team is capable at times of being really impressive, but also at other times looks pretty flat and fragile. Manchester City has conceded a lot of goals in this season, far more than usual, and you could carry on like that. And so, to answer your question, which I could have done with a single word, do you have a favorite? The answer is no, I don't have one.
Philippe, we're on radio. Why say one word when you can say far more? I mean, that's how we do things.
That's correct.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Cheers. Philippe Auclair with us, looking ahead to tonight's game, in particular in Munich, where Bayern are 1-0 up on PSG without Neymar, as we've been discussing. Football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. You can catch the biggest live Premier League games every weekend on Sky Sports.